So namaste, good evening everybody, welcome, good to see everybody, and I can see that some more people are arriving. It's such a pleasure for me, an honor for me to be able to welcome you to Anam Cara's meditation program each Thursday evening, and really to have the feeling, I'm welcoming you to the program, I'm welcoming you also into my home. And that fills me with a special delight. For many years, we ran a meditation center out of our home in West Hartford and other places. So it feels like coming full circle on that and having everybody's bring their divine company into the presence of my home. So it really moves me and touches my heart that you're able to join us this evening. So in a few moments, we're going to be starting with the opening mantras. And if you've had a chance to download those from the Anam Cara meditation website, on the meditation page, you can follow us along, chant along, listen if you like. And if you're not chanting, also really listen. It's actually a meditative practice. Even hearing mantra is seen as a way where, the root of mantra is Shakti. It said that it's Kundalini Shakti that produces all the sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet and is the root power underlying all mantra. And so mantra has been used as a way of being able to sort of infuse ourselves with that highest vibration, that highest consciousness that's encoded in mantra, because that's the real essence of mantra. So when we listen, it helps also to be able to sort of set the mind aside, and that you're kind of listening with a third ear, and the ability to really kind of intuit the sense and the consciousness that's there, that is inviting us to go beyond the ordinary mind. So with these opening mantras, we're invoking the power of the infinite to remove obstacles. And then we're also invoking the power of the infinite to allow us to experience the fullness, that even in the midst of all diversity and the manifold nature of the universe and everything going on, the infinite remains untouched. And so that's why in that mantra it says, from the infinite comes the infinite, and the infinite remains. Well, that infinitude that embraces both all that's manifesting as well as remaining in its fullness all the time, that entirety is our true nature. And it's that entirety that we can take refuge in through the power of mantra. So we're going to start with the opening mantras, and then we'll just sit for a few moments in stillness, in the silence. That's the fruit of mantra, that's the gift. And then we'll move ahead with the program from there. Shri Mata Tam shokam vinashakaratam namami vigneshwara parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Mata Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. So namaste, good evening, and welcome again. With all my heart, I'm so happy to have you with us and bring your sublime nature into this moment and helping to embrace the world with that level of consciousness that can help to transform everything. And so tonight, I was going to be talking a little bit about Dharma. And, you know, these times, and I hear from a lot of people that I work with, but also friends, relatives, everybody, you know, with so many things being disrupted, just the disruption, just the change in people's lives and structures and routines and everything, those are stressful in and of themselves. You know, we know from the field of psychology and the research that any major change is a stressor. Positive changes. One of the biggest stressors on stress scales is even getting married. So positive things can be a major stressor, as well as the kind of disruptions that go with the threatening circumstances we're encountering with the virus and all the outcomes hitting our everything from our economy to our friends and loved ones. So a lot of stress in the air. And that stress itself can be kind of contagious. So we have to really do more for ourselves to take care of ourselves, because also we know from the research, you know, when we're calmer, more centered, meditative practices, in fact, boost our immune system. And there have been tests showing that simple kinds of practices really enhance our immune system dramatically. And that was shown back in a study in 2005 by John Kabat-Zinn, looking at a simple practice of mindfulness, just being able to take 40 to 45 minutes a day of simply calming and deepening the breath and remaining mindful, just following, just stepping back, following the breath. A thought comes along, we let it go, we come back to the breath. Something else comes up, we let it go, and we come back to the breath. It sounds so simple and so routine, but it has a profound effect on what's going on in the body, the brain, different areas of the brain. We can see that in everything from functional MRI studies showing changes in what's going on in cortical activity and different circuits in the brain. So these really simple, easy to do kinds of practices have profound effects on how we can deal with everyday life. And certainly, you know, even 2,500, 3,000 years ago, when yoga and meditation was developing, things were very stressful back then. There were lots of diseases that affected people. There were horrible rulers that affected people. And so drawing on the power of practice in order to be centered, to be focused, to be able to draw on all our resources and capacities to deal with those things and create change in the ways that we can becomes very important. And coming back to structure, that really supports the mind optimally functioning. Now, there's a lot of room for variation. There's differences in people's circadian rhythms in terms of who's a morning person, who's a nighttime person. But being able to structure in a routine of meditative practices makes a huge difference in being able to really gain those benefits. And I saw it really profoundly. For a couple of years, each week, I was going into a federal penitentiary just as a volunteer to offer meditation practices and dealing with inmates who ranged from murderers to people who were thieves, robbers, et cetera, et cetera. And in a prison, which is a highly stressful kind of environment, it does not invite being relaxed and at ease. Everything's ringing with the sound of iron bars and jail doors opening and closing and resounding through the cement block pathways and hallways of the prison. So it's an assault on your senses just going in there. And I remember numerous of the inmates that I was working with and just teaching basic meditation practices, breath, mantra, coming back to the self, things that they had never heard of. But even in that environment, being able to structure it in and gain the benefits of it. And some of them saying like, oh, so I'm enclosed now. Now I'm looking at my cell as a monk cell. So by a shift in their sort of understanding, they took the reality of, yes, they were imprisoned, but what were they going to do with that? And how were they going to use that as a way to be able to transform their consciousness and change their inner environment? So when we're, in isolation, we've reduced so many activities. Well, in many ways, that's what we do when we go on retreat. That's exactly what we do. We reduce the amount of activities. We may not talk to people much. We develop a more introspective kind of way of viewing things. And we also practice noticing, becoming aware of our environment, becoming aware of our surroundings, becoming aware of nature. For as far back as the scriptures go in the yogic and Buddhist traditions, one of the main sort of analogies that's used for Dharma and being Dharmic is the rising and setting of the sun, the unfolding of nature, that these things happen with a regularity. And so the turning of the earth, the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, the rising of the moon, the setting of the moon, the kind of absolute regularity that they have became a model for people to try to emulate in terms of being truly regular in their practices, because it upholds things. Now, the word Dharma itself has a number of different sort of connotations. It's often used to describe sort of the law, the principles that you follow. The Dharma of Buddhism would be the Noble Eightfold Path and the practices and things that go with that. You could think of the Dharma in yoga as the yamas and the niyamas that are spelled out in Ashtanga Yoga and the 8 limbs of yoga. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the 10 Commandments is a way of codifying Dharma. But also the word Dharma has a different meaning, and that it means simply the support. What supports us? What gives us strength? And yes, following those kinds of rules and following the law, but it has a different sense when it's connected to how do you become dharmic and being attuned internally. That it's not just about following external laws, it's about following the inner voice, because these traditions, the meditative traditions, are saying, the true voice of Dharma is the infinite, the divine. And that's present in each and every one of us. That is our essential nature. So an important component of Dharma is becoming attuned to that inner support. So writings about Dharma will say, yeah, it's one thing to know right and wrong and have to think about that and say, okay, I'm going to choose the right thing. It's another level of sort of clarity that just the right is immediately presenting itself, and you just spontaneously and naturally go with that. So that is part of what the development of the practices aim at, is that this spontaneous unfolding of our compassion, our loving kindness. So when Buddha was talking about the 4 immeasurables, that these things spontaneously present themselves through us. The loving kindness, the wisdom, the unshakable equanimity, the boundless love, that this is our essential nature. And so when we're seated in that, like when we're seated in Dharma, then Dharma Shakti, the power of those qualities, they emanate through us. They carry us into our actions. And so I wanted to read from the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada is a set of the most ancient and original sayings of Buddha. And in the Dhammapada, there are several chapters. And if you're interested, Eknath Easwaran's translation and commentary on the Dhammapada is one of the best. So if you're looking for something that's a great addition to your library, this particular text is wonderful. And so this is what Eknath Easwaran is talking about when he says, it's on chapter 19, Becoming Established in Dharma. And he writes, the subject of this chapter is the person whose life has become established in Dharma. But the word here has a fuller connotation than the Buddha's Eightfold Path. for Dharma was an ancient concept in India, even when the Buddha was born. The word probably comes from the root dri, to support, and volumes have been written on the different meanings it has acquired. But from a practical standpoint, the core meaning is simply that which supports. Dharma is the very underpinning of our existence, the underlying unity of life, the essential support of all. And it stands for the cosmic order, the order of indivisible wholeness, and therefore for the moral order in human life. And so it also means law in the sense of a central law of creation. So when we're studying Dharma and thinking about Dharma at a time when so many aspects of Dharma have been really shaken in our lives, and I don't mean just the Dharma, the law that we have to follow, or the regularity of the supports that we used to count on for our livelihood, for our relationships, everything like that. This is Kali Yuga, and I've discussed that in the past. This is that dark age where Dharma is at its lowest ebb. And so we see Dharma challenged on many levels, in everything from the government and leaders in government, to leaders of corporations, to a whole economic system that wants to put profit above all people. Well, that's not Dharma. That has to be flipped at some point. But being able to be centered in the midst of that kind of a Dharma that is so prevalent, that gives us the strength then to be able to make those kinds of efforts that will bring about change and support others who are doing that. So when Buddha goes on, and now these are Buddha's words in this chapter, Buddha says, "They are not following Dharma who resort to violence to achieve their purpose, but those who lead others through nonviolent means, knowing right and wrong, may be called guardians of the Dharma." It brings to mind, Mahatma Gandhi, who took that teaching and made it his way of creating a revolution in India and ousting the suppression of a horrific British imperial government to really transform the country through nonviolent means. It was Martin Luther King's tenet, the nonviolent action. So even in creating change, even creating revolution, we can resort to dharmic ways of doing that. Buddha goes on, "One is not wise because he talks a good deal. They are wise who are patient and free from hate and fear. Dharma is not upheld by talking about it. Dharma is upheld by living in harmony with it, even if one is not learned. See, gray hair does not make an elder. One can grow old and still be immature. A true elder is truthful, virtuous, gentle, self-controlled, and pure in mind. Neither pleasant words nor a pretty face can make beautiful a person who is jealous, selfish, and deceitful. Only those who have uprooted such impurities from the mind are fit to be called beautiful. Shaving one's head cannot make a monk of one who is undisciplined, untruthful, and driven by selfish desires. He is a real monk who has extinguished all selfish desires, large and small. Begging alms, as a monk does not make a bhikshu, and one must follow the Dharma completely. He is truly a monk, a bhikshu in the Buddhist tradition, who is chaste and beyond the reach of good and evil, who passes through the world with detachment. Observing silence cannot make a sage of one who is ignorant and immature. He is wise who, holding the scales, chooses the good and avoids the bad. One is not noble who injures living creatures. They are noble who hurt no one. That's why ahimsa, nonviolence, is the root of the Eastern traditions, both yogic and Buddhist. It's the fundamental principle of ahimsa. Not by rituals and resolutions, nor by much learning, nor by celibacy, nor even by meditation can you find the supreme, immortal joy of nirvana until you have extinguished your self-will. That means that all that drives the ego mind. And so that understanding of Dharma that we can draw on as a support can be integrated anytime, any place. It's not just a particular practice. It's not just the practice of meditation. It's not just the practice of mantra. Though these are called dharmas, practices. But when we're looking at how do we take refuge and how do we find refuge in the midst of so much turmoil, that means coming back to that sense of, I have the power. I am empowered to transform this day. I am empowered to transform this hour, this moment. I'm empowered to say, where is my attention going to rest? And is that going to be a support? What's going to uplift my attention in the moment? And in that way, there are many things that we draw on, from how do we keep good company, both externally but internally. What are the books? What are the wise sayings? What are the words of great masters and great traditions that we keep company with? Because then the power of their words and their wisdom dyes the cloth of our mind and body with that wisdom. So taking refuge in various practices and establishing them as a routine is really critical in these kinds of times of turmoil, so that we know we have that support beneath us. And we've talked a lot about mantra, and mantra is one of the key practices across traditions, because it's so easy to bring the mind to anytime, any place, to take hold of that support. Because mantra is a throb of the infinite. It's a pulsation of that consciousness. It says, all there is the divine. Yes, right now that's showing up in all these tumultuous ways. It's showing up in ways where people are suffering. But there is a reality beyond that that holds the fullness of all beings in that loving embrace, and we can know that directly. Because that's the other thing about the Dharmic practices. They're aimed at giving us the direct experience, not having faith that somebody at some point, the Buddha 2,500 years ago, or Christ 2,000 years ago, or Shankaracharya 1,000 years ago, whoever it might have been, knows that. We have the capacity here and now. And that's our Dharma to realize and then walk into the world through our life. And structuring the day and saying, okay, how do I take care of my body? Because there's a lot of people talking about, oh, I'm putting on, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Can't believe what's happening. Well, then we have to look at, what are we doing? A lot of times that kind of eating is stress-driven. And eating itself has a kind of a sedating effect. That's why it feels like it works. It's sort of, you eat a big meal, you feel tired. You eat a meal, it takes down your energy. You eat a meal, sometimes it brings down a little bit of the anxiety, so the body and mind go back to it. But when we're drawing on practices, like doing a Hatha Yoga, and Alka Kaminer, who's one of our Sangha members, I see she's with us this evening, she's been offering Hatha Yoga classes online. You can look her up and get her information. But doing practices that truly benefit the body, truly transform it, and give us a calm steadiness. That's the kind of practice we want to take refuge in. Doing things like the mantra and coming back to that. We were chanting the Tara mantra last week, Om Tere Tu Tere Tore Soha. Om Tere Tu Tere Tore Soha. So when the mind is agitated, we can come back to that. We can chant that in our heads or out loud. And come to that power of consciousness that pulsates in mantra, that is a throb of that. And so tonight we're going to be doing the world, what I call the world mantras. And it's a chant that's on the CD, the Chant and Meditation CD that I put out a couple of years ago, that's on the Soul's Journey website. But it's a chant of mantras that come from all the great traditions, because every tradition has recognized both the power of sound and how it can transform our mind and our consciousness and serve as a refuge. And so that's not it's not possessed by one tradition, one teacher, one anything. It's universal. And that's why it can really be seen as a gift from the infinite. You know, mantra and how we can take hold of it is something that starts out in our ordinary awareness, in this ordinary state of consciousness, where we can say Om Namah Shivaya or Om Kali Ma, or Om Mani Padme Hum. We can say the mantra, and it's very easy for the mind to take hold of. And so it's like a life preserver. But the string on the life preserver is held by the infinite. And so if we take hold of that, we get reeled into the boundless domain of the infinite that is our true nature. You are that. You are the auspicious one, Shiva. You are the bloom in the lotus in Om Mani Padme Hum. You are the Tara in Om Tari Tum Soha. That is your nature. And so the mantras are a way of invoking that. Because right now, we are super saturated in the news and every portal around with words that will tell you how diminished you are, how restricted you are, how small you are, what your suffering is, how much more suffering there may be. All that is what's called matrika shakti. It's the power of words that creates our reality. So we really need to be able to step back from that and set that aside and say, wait a minute, what do I want to keep the company of? What's the power of sound and words that I want running through my consciousness that uplifts, that's dharmic, that inspires, that's going to help me be creative and a force in this world for creating and supporting change, even if it's just, in my little plot of land around my house, or in a larger venue. Doesn't matter. That state of consciousness is what we can shift into. And what the yogis and the Buddhas have talked about is attention, attention, attention. It's all about attention. Where do we let our attention rest? That's why Buddha said, as you think, so you become. As you think, so you become. How we think creates that reality. Right? So when we think of ourselves as the infinite, that we've come from that is our root nature, the nature of all beings, that underlying unity is present if we step back from the mind and its nature for dividing things up and perceiving what's little, and step back into the consciousness of infinitude. And so these mantras from the various traditions really are ways of invoking that. So we're going to chant that for a while, and the chant is up on the screen in the chat box if you haven't gotten the chanting sheet. And so we're going to chant that for a while, and then at the end we'll also do some chants, some rounds of the slow Om Namah Shivaya, and then just sit in the stillness. That's where the deepest knowing unfolds. It's in that stillness. When finally all the words are gone, all the mantras are done, what remains? The stillness, the loving embrace of the infinite. That's where we come to know that. That's where we really come to rest. So we're going to begin with these mantras now. Om Mani Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Taritam Soha. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Santa Maria, Santa Maria, Mater Dei, Mater Dei. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Taritam Soha. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. I know Milvando. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Santa Maria, Santa Maria, Mater Dei. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Daritam Soha. Om Daritam Soha. Om Daritam Daritam Soha. Om Daritam Daritam Soha. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Ainod milvando. Ainod milvando. Ainod milvando. Ainod milvando. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Santa Maria. Santa Maria. Mater Dei. Mater Dei. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Kali Durge Ma. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Taritam Soha. Om Taritam Soha. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Ainod milvando. Ainod milvando. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Santa Maria. Santa Maria. Mater Dei. breath by breath, taking refuge in Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to the auspicious one. The one who bows is Shiva. The one who is bowed to is Shiva. Shiva, the auspicious one. All that's present is the divine in form, the divine in transcendence, the divine embracing all as its own self. Take refuge in the loving embrace of the divine, the one place the mind can finally come to complete and utter stillness and rest. Rest in the arms of the infinite. Infinite love, infinite care, infinite embrace. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to you. Om Namah Shivaya. And so we end with this prayer, that may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. So all the more important in these times to take refuge in Dharma. And we can simplify Dharma, really. It's about being true to our highest nature, being true to who you truly are, that you are an embodiment of the infinite, the divine. Your heart is the heart of the divine. Your mind, in essence, is the mind of the infinite. Know these so that you can bring them into the world. You can walk them into the world. We can walk loving compassion, kindness, wisdom, equanimity, and walk them with strength. Now, walking is the act of moving forward. We want to move these forward into the world. So be true to your highest nature, and you'll be true to Dharma. Use the practices to attune yourself to your highest nature. And then it becomes second nature, really to live that moment by moment. So once again, I want to thank you all for coming, just from the depths of my heart. I love you. I love your presence. I love your presence in the whole world. And it's really up to all of us, all of you, our whole Sangha and all the Sanghas around the world and all the different traditions, to be able to bring the highest into this world. So stay true to yourself. Stay true to yourself. And I hope to see you next week. So namaste. Good night.